Welcome back, dear listeners and friends of the Quiet Hour, to your space for peaceful bedtime stories. Tonight, we begin a new grand adventure that will test the limits of human endurance. Prepare to enter realms where mortals and jinn collide, and where love demands the impossible. Our story tonight is about impossible love. It concerns a prince who saw a perfect image in a dream and abandoned his throne to search for his beloved, a daughter of the king of the jinn. We follow Prince Sayf al-Muluk, in parentheses, the Sword of Kings, and his pursuit of Badi'a al-Jamal, in parentheses, beauty of the age, in a tale that redefines adventure. Please relax, close your eyes, and let the narrative begin. They relate that in ancient times, in the city of Cairo, there lived a mighty sultan named Aziz al-Masr, the king of Egypt. The sultan was just and wealthy, but he bore one sorrow. He was aging, and his only heir was his son, Sayf al-Muluk. Sayf al-Muluk was handsome, intelligent, and skilled in all arts of war. When the prince reached maturity, the sultan summoned him. "My son," the sultan commanded, "you must fulfill your duty. You must take a queen of high birth to stand beside you when you ascend this throne." Sayf al-Muluk remained respectful. He had seen the most beautiful women of the court, but none had moved his heart. He explained that he was not yet ready for marriage, preferring his studies and martial training. The sultan accepted this for a time. However, court gossip began, claiming the prince was uninterested in continuing the dynasty. One quiet night, the prince retired to his chamber. He extinguished the lamps and fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, a dream, startlingly real, descended upon him. He found himself not in his familiar room, but in a vast, ethereal garden. The trees bore jewels, the streams flowed with silver, and the air held a sublime scent. In the center of this garden, seated on a throne carved from a single emerald, was a maiden. She was the most exquisite being Sayf al-Muluk had ever imagined. Her hair was like woven moonlight, her eyes were like distant stars, and her presence shone with light. She was robed in shimmering silk and wore a crown of pearls. Sayf al-Muluk's heart was instantly captivated by her beauty. He felt a powerful, consuming love. He tried to speak her name, but his voice failed. The maiden, gazing at him with melancholy understanding, smiled gently. She raised a delicate hand and, with a motion of immense grace, spoke a single word that echoed clearly in the prince's mind. The vision immediately shattered. The garden and the maiden vanished, and Sayf al-Muluk awoke with a gasp. Back in the darkness of his chamber, he sat up, trembling, the scent of the magical garden lingering. The vision had been so absolute that it felt more like a memory. He knew that he could never again look upon mortal women. His heart belonged entirely and forever to the maiden he had seen in his dream. He spent the rest of the night in torment. When dawn broke, he emerged a changed man. His appetite and strength vanished, and his spirit withered. He grew pale and weak, succumbing to a consuming sorrow, a sickness caused by an impossible love. His royal life meant nothing without the maiden. Sultan Aziz al-Masr, alarmed by his son's rapid decline, summoned the most renowned physicians. They found no physical illness. They declared his affliction a deep, mysterious melancholy of the heart. Finally, the Sultan implored his son to reveal the cause of his suffering, promising help. Sayf al-Muluk, weakened by torment, confessed. He recounted the entire dream, the garden, the emerald throne, and the sublime maiden who had stolen his soul. He explained that he was in love with a phantom, and only finding her could save him. The wise vizier listened intently. "O prince," he said softly, "you are afflicted with love for the unattainable. That garden and that maiden are not of the world of men. You have seen Badi'a al-Jamal, the daughter of Shahil, in parentheses, king of the Jinn, the mighty king of the Jinn. Your quest is one of magic and the deepest trials." The prince's quest and his inevitable agony were just beginning. Upon hearing the wise vizier's declaration that his beloved was Badi'a al-Jamal, daughter of Shahil, Prince Sayf al-Muluk found no peace but a deeper, profound agony. The object of his desire was real, yet impossibly distant. The prince's physical health declined rapidly. He refused all nourishment, finding no solace in his surroundings. The royal doctors confirmed to Sultan Aziz al-Masr that this was a malady of the soul, incurable by earthly medicine. The sultan, seeing his only son fading away from this sorrowful madness, grew desperate. Guided by his vizier, he concluded that the only chance for the prince's survival was to permit the impossible quest. The sultan approached his son. "My heart is breaking, my son," he pleaded. "If your life depends on a journey to the realms of the Jinn, then I shall not hinder you. I grant you permission to pursue your heart's desire, no matter the cost. Tell me what you need. All the power of Egypt shall aid your quest." Sayf al-Muluk, hearing his father's words, felt a jolt of life return to his weary soul. The royal blessing acted as an elixir. He rose from his bed, his eyes blazing with fierce, renewed determination. He knew he required knowledge, not an army, for the magical realms. "Father," the prince said, his voice weak but clear, "my quest requires wisdom. I must seek out the most knowledgeable scholars and travelers, those who understand the secrets of the world beyond man. I must find a way to Shahil's dominion." The sultan immediately ordered a nationwide proclamation. He gathered all the learned men, seasoned mariners, dervishes, and wanderers from every corner of his vast kingdom. The royal court was filled with the clamor of theories and fantastical tales, but days passed, and no concrete plan emerged. The prince listened, his hopes slowly draining away as he faced the grim reality that mortal wisdom was insufficient. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm the prince, a very old, wizened traveler stepped forward. His name was Sheikh Abd al-Samad. His face was etched with the maps of countless journeys, and he knelt before the prince. "O noble prince," the old man said, his voice raspy yet clear, "I have not seen the realms of the Jinn, for that is beyond a mortal's reach. But I have spent 80 years sailing the seas and studying the ancient histories. I know of a very old legend, a legend of a hidden island in the furthest west, known as the Isle of Perpetual Sleep." The sheikh continued, "It is said that upon this island stands a wondrous, colossal marble pillar, placed there by the ancient spirits themselves. This pillar is inscribed with all the knowledge of the first world, containing prophecies of things hidden and revealed, including the ways of the mighty Jinn. You must find this pillar. It is believed," the old traveler finished, "that within the inscriptions on that pillar, one might find the exact location, the necessary incantations, or the required talisman to safely enter the dominion of the mighty Jinn King Shahil. This is your only earthly recourse, Prince. You must find a pillar, and then you must find someone who can read the language of the spirits." Sayf al-Muluk immediately felt an intense surge of hope. This was a definite path however perilous. He thanked the sheikh profusely, rewarding him with immense gifts of gold, but the old man accepted only a small piece of bread and water, saying his reward was seeing a true seeker of love begin his quest. The prince then went to his father. He requested a swift ship, provisioned for a long, indefinite voyage, and a small, loyal crew. He requested his finest, magnificent, engraved ruby ring, a symbol of his status, and a beautifully crafted suit of armor, suitable for a king's son embarking on a sacred mission. Sultan Aziz Al-Master granted his son all his requests, though his heart was heavy with dread. The greatest royal ship was prepared. The Sultan wept as he saw his beloved son, pale and wasted but radiating an impossible fire, preparing to leave the comfort of the palace for the deadly sea. Before departing, Sayf al-Muluk entrusted the governance of Egypt to the wise vizier. He instructed him to care for the kingdom and comfort the sultan during his long absence. The prince knew the journey might take decades, but living without Badi'a al-Jamal was a fate worse than any peril. The farewell was heart-wrenching. The sultan embraced his son, weeping openly, fearing he would never see him again. Sayf al-Muluk comforted his father with words of hope and loyalty, promising to return only with his queen. Sayf al-Muluk, wearing his armor and the royal ring, boarded the ship. The sails were raised, and the ship quickly pulled away from the harbors of Cairo, sailing west, toward the perilous ocean and the mythical isle of perpetual sleep. The prince stood on the deck, his eyes fixed on the horizon, leaving behind the greatest kingdom on earth for the sake of a single, impossible dream. His lonely and epic quest to conquer the heart of the daughter of the king of the Jinn had officially begun. Prince Sayf al-Muluk and his small, loyal crew sailed westward for many long months. Their voyage was arduous, marked by sudden, ferocious storms, unnerving calms that stretched for weeks, and constant uncertainty. They passed famous coastal cities, watched them vanish into the horizon, and eventually ventured into unknown stretches of the great ocean. Yet the prince never lost heart. His singular love for Badi'a al-Jamal acted as his compass, his source of strength, and his only reason for enduring the relentless sea. His crew, though initially skeptical of the quest for a maiden seen only in a dream, were gradually swayed by the prince's intense, noble bearing and his unwavering faith. They saw that their master, though young, was driven by a passion greater than any earthly ambition or treasure. Their loyalty deepened into respect and awe. Finally, after nearly a year at sea, the ship reached the vast open waters of the far west. One clear morning, a sailor on a masthead cried out, sighting land. As they drew closer, they realized the land was unlike any they had ever seen, matching the descriptions of the ancient traveler. It was the Isle of Perpetual Sleep. The island was shrouded in an eternal heavy mist that seemed to suppress sound and movement. The air itself felt strangely dense and cool. No birds sang, and no waves crashed loudly upon the shore. It was a place of immense, silent beauty, covered in vegetation that was ancient and dark, unlike the lively green of the known world. Sayf al-Muluk and his crew anchored the ship cautiously in a deep, quiet cove. The prince, wearing his royal armor and armed with his sword, led the landing party ashore. He ordered the remaining crew to stay with the ship, warning them sternly not to disturb the silence of the place, for they were in the domain of forgotten spirits. They proceeded inland, the soft, thick moss muffling their footsteps. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the subtle, unnatural rustle of giant black leaves. After trekking for a day and a night through the ancient, hushed forest, they reached the center of the island. Here, beneath an opening in the dense canopy, stood the legendary site described by Sheikh Abd al-Samad, a colossal marble pillar. The pillar was unbelievably ancient, rising perhaps 100 cubits into the air. It was not built of carved blocks, but seemed to be a single smooth shaft of white marble, polished by millennia of time. Its surface was covered from top to bottom with intricate, strange inscriptions, symbols, figures, and archaic languages unknown to the prince or his men. These were clearly the writings of the spirits, the secrets of the Jinn world. The prince was overwhelmed. He had found the key to his quest, but the language was impenetrable. He knew he could not take the pillar with him, nor could he copy the entire inscription quickly. He ordered his men to set up a small, temporary camp at the base of the pillar. Sayf al-Muluk then sat down, utterly defeated by the language barrier. His despair was immediate and profound. All the suffering, all the perilous travel, had led him to a scroll written in a language he could not read. His quest, built on impossible hope, seemed to end here, blocked by a single unreadable wall of marble. As he sat there, consumed by sorrow and the silent dread of failure, he was suddenly aware of a presence. An old man, dressed in simple, flowing white robes, stood near the base of the pillar. The man appeared from nowhere, his eyes wise and ancient. He carried a staff carved from dark wood. The old man approached the distraught prince. "Why do you grieve, O son of mortals?" the stranger asked, his voice gentle, like the whisper of the wind over stone. "And why have you disturbed the eternal sleep of this isle?" Sayf al-Muluk, recognizing the noble and spiritual aura of the man, immediately rose and bowed respectfully. "O venerable sheikh," the prince replied, "I am Sayf al-Muluk, son of Sultan Aziz al-Masr. I came here, enduring the perils of the sea, to seek knowledge from this pillar. I am consumed by a desperate love for Badi'a al-Jamal, daughter of the Jinn king Shahil, and I require the wisdom inscribed here to reach her realm. But I cannot read the language of the spirits." The wise old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. "I am Kaider," he announced, using the name given to the legendary immortal who guides seekers of deep truth. "I have guarded this pillar for thousands of years. The language inscribed here is indeed the ancient tongue of the Jinn, known only to a few immortal souls." The prince fell to his knees, recognizing his incredible fortune. He had encountered a true guide of destiny. Kaider raised him up gently. "Rise, Prince of Egypt. Your noble suffering and pure intent have drawn me from my duty. I shall read the inscriptions for you, but you must transcribe the exact words I speak, for the prophecy is long and exact." Sayf al-Muluk quickly summoned his most literate crew member, providing him with ink and parchment. Sheikh Kaider then began the long, measured task of translating the sacred writings etched upon the pillar of perpetual sleep. The prince and his men labored through the night and into the next day, recording the words that held the key to the Jinn kingdom and the heart of Badi'a al-Jamal. The first crucial step of the quest, achieved through impossible luck and divine intervention, was complete. Prince Sayf underscore, and the man finished transcribing the words revealed by Kaider from the ancient marble pillar. The inscriptions detailed not only the location of Shahil's kingdom, but the nature of its protection and the specific trials required for a mortal to enter. Kaider explained the most critical revelation. The pillar states that the realm of Shahil, where Badi'a resides, lies across the seven seas of the invisible. You cannot reach it by ordinary sailing, even in the fastest ship. You require a magical conveyance, and that vessel is protected by a powerful, fearsome spell. The inscription revealed that the only ship capable of navigating these ethereal seas was hidden in the island of the Black Smoke. This small island was protected by powerful ancient enchantments designed to prevent any mortal, or even lesser jinn, from approaching its shores. Furthermore, the pillar revealed the nature of the trials Sayf must face. To successfully petition Shahil for his daughter's hand, the prince must present two gifts of immense, unique value. Gifts so rare they could sway the heart of a king of the jinn. One, a magical stone of perpetual youth, a jewel found only in the deepest volcano mines. Two, a scroll of forgotten history containing the complete true history of the creation of the Jinn realms, hidden in the deepest sea. Kaider completed the transcription just as the sun rose, casting light across the silent isle of perpetual sleep. He handed the large parchment, now filled with the secrets of the Jinn, to Sayf. "This scroll is your life," Kaider instructed. "Guard it with your last breath. It names the exact coordinates of the island of the Black Smoke and provides the counter-incantation necessary to breach its protective spell. You must now leave this place of rest and begin the true quest." Sayf fell to his knees, overwhelmed by gratitude. "O venerable Kaider, how can a mortal repay such a divine favor?" Kaider smiled softly. "Your repayment is your success, Prince. Your noble suffering and your pure love for Badi'a are your true currency. Do not fail. You have much suffering ahead, but you are now armed with knowledge." With that, Kaider vanished as silently as he had appeared, leaving the prince alone with his destiny. The prince rose, a transformation complete within him. He was no longer a lovesick youth, but a warrior armed with divine knowledge. He gathered his small crew, who were astonished by the sudden, profound shift in their master's demeanor. He ordered them to set sail immediately, heading east, following the cryptic instructions on the scroll towards the perilous island of the Black Smoke. The journey away from the Isle of Perpetual Sleep was swift. The prince pored over the scroll, memorizing the coordinates and the complex counter-incantation. The scroll also contained stark warnings. It detailed the immense power of the enchantments protecting the island of the Black Smoke, warning that any deviation from the precise path or failure in reciting the incantation would result in the ship's immediate destruction. After sailing for several harrowing weeks, the sky ahead darkened. They saw a vast, perpetually swirling cloud of dark vapor, the Black Smoke, rising from a hidden landmass. As they drew closer, the very air became charged with an unnatural energy. The compasses spun wildly, and the ship groaned under an invisible pressure that threatened to crush the hull. The prince knew this was the moment of truth. He dismissed his terrified crew to the ship's hold for their safety, taking the helm himself. He raised the scroll, carefully reciting the long, complex incantation given by Kaider, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The words of the Jinn language felt strange and powerful on his tongue. As he finished the final phrase, the Black Smoke parted instantly, like a curtain drawn by an invisible hand. The pressure on the ship vanished. A path opened directly to the shore of the island, revealing a beach of black volcanic sand and jagged rock. Sayf anchored the ship. He stepped onto the dark shore, the air tasting of sulfur and ancient magic. The island was desolate, covered in black rock formations. Following the instructions on the scroll, the prince began searching for the hidden magical vessel. After traversing the desolate coast for hours, he finally discovered it, a colossal brass coffer half buried beneath the cliff face. The scroll confirmed that the magical ship was contained within this coffer, shrunk and protected by a powerful ward. The prince, using his immense strength, managed to dislodge the coffer. Upon it was inscribed a final, short instruction. The key is the sorrow that opens the sea. Sayf pondered the riddle. He realized the key was not metal, but emotion. His profound sorrow, born from his great love and longing for Badi'a, was the only force strong enough to break the final lock. He placed his royal ruby ring on the coffer, focusing all his love and pain upon the brass. The coffer instantly glowed with a bright, blinding light. The prince shielded his eyes. A powerful, rushing sound erupted from the coffer. The massive brass coffer began to crack and dissolve into vapor. As the brass disappeared, it revealed the magnificent magical vessel within. The vessel was a magnificent ship of the brass mast. It was not built of wood, but of polished, iridescent metal that shone with an inner light. It had a single, towering mast made of gleaming brass, and its sails were woven from what appeared to be pure moonlight, never needing an earthly wind. This ship was ready for its master's command. The colossal brass coffer dissolved into vapor, revealing the magnificent ship of the brass mast. Sayf knew this magical vessel was his true passage to the realms of the Jinn. The prince quickly ordered his small crew to transfer the remaining supplies, his armor, and the priceless scroll to the magical ship. He then gave them a painful farewell. "You have served me loyally," Sayf declared, "but your part ends here. This ship sails the 7 seas of the invisible. Return to my father, Sultan Aziz Al-Masr. Tell him I continue the quest with unwavering resolve." The crew wept, but they understood. Sayf boarded the ship of the brass mast. He took the helm, focusing his mind on the coordinates for Shahail's kingdom, as written on the sacred scroll. The brass mast hummed, and the moonlight sails billowed, responding to the prince's silent command. In moments, the ship of the brass mast plunged into the 7 seas of the invisible. The environment around the ship twisted instantly, moving from a fiery purple sky to a sea of liquid silver. Sayf faced terrifying illusions, but his love for Badi'a kept him intensely focused. After 40 days and nights, the bizarre seas settled, and the ship emerged into a calm, known ocean. Sayf had successfully crossed the first great magical barrier. He immediately consulted the sacred scroll again. The time had come to begin the search for the first of the 2 required gifts, the magical stone of perpetual youth. The scroll provided the general location, the land of al-Jamal, dominated by a constantly erupting volcano known as the Mountain of Fire. The stone was hidden deep within the volcano's inner mines. Sayf directed the ship of the brass mast towards al-Jamal. After weeks of sailing, the prince saw the coastline, a land perpetually shrouded in an orange-red glow, dominated by the colossal Mountain of Fire. Sayf anchored his vessel safely and disembarked, leaving the magical ship protected by an incantation. He carried only his sword and the sacred parchment. The heat was unbearable, and the ground shook constantly. Sayf pressed on, seeking the hidden entrance to the volcano mines. He found it a narrow, deep crevice in the mountain's base, guarded by an invisible barrier of searing heat. Sayf recited a short, sharp phrase from the scroll, a charm against heat and shadow. The air around the crevice cooled instantly, opening the passage. He entered the mountain of fire. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the distant fiery glow of molten rock. The air was heavy. Sayf began his slow descent, guided by the faintly glowing scroll. He navigated around pools of shimmering, molten gold, illusions that the scroll warned were traps. Deep within the mine, the prince encountered the first guardian, living shadow. It was a massive, formless entity of pure darkness, blocking the main tunnel. The shadow roared and lunged. Sayf, remembering the scroll's instructions, did not draw his sword. He recited an ancient prayer for protection, focusing on the light of his pure love for Badi'a. The prayer acted like sunlight. The living shadow shrieked and dissolved into the rock walls, clearing the path. The prince proceeded, the heat becoming so intense that his armor glowed dull red. He finally reached a massive cavern, the heart of the ancient mine. Upon a pedestal of black obsidian sat the magical stone of perpetual youth. As Sayf reached for the stone, a final, terrible guardian appeared. It was Ifrit al-Hama, a powerful djinn of fire and rock, built of molten material, with eyes like burning coals. Mortal, the Ifrit thundered, swinging a massive hammer forged from magma. Sayf dodged the blow and drew his royal sword. He knew he could not defeat the Ifrit in pure strength. The scroll flashed in his mind. The Ifrit is strong, but fears the chill of the earth. Seeing a stream of ordinary water nearby, Sayf launched a desperate counterattack. He lured the Ifrit toward a cool, stable rock shelf. Just as the Ifrit raised his hammer for the final blow, Sayf plunged his sword into the stream of water. The sword glowed, instantly freezing a large block of ice. He kicked the block, sending it tumbling directly towards the Ifrit. The sudden, intense cold reacted violently with the Ifrit's molten body. The Ifrit al-Hama screamed as his rock body crystallized and cracked. With an explosive sound, the Ifrit shattered into millions of pieces of harmless obsidian dust. Sayf, exhausted but victorious, retrieved the magical stone of perpetual youth. The first impossible gift was his. He now had to escape the volcano and begin the search for the second gift. Prince Sayf, exhausted but victorious, retrieved the magical stone of perpetual youth. The first impossible gift was his. He now had to secure the second gift, the scroll of forgotten history. He quickly retraced his steps out of the mountain of fire. The intense heat still burned, but the prince, strengthened by success and guided by the subtle coolness radiating from the stone of perpetual youth, found his way back to the secluded harbor where the ship of the brass mast awaited him. Sayf boarded the magical vessel. He sealed the precious stone of perpetual youth in a pouch close to his heart, alongside the sacred scroll revealed by Kaider. He took the helm, focusing his will and his love towards the next destination. Consulting the scroll, the prince found the detailed instructions for the second quest. The scroll of forgotten history was located in the city of the Sunken Bells, a legendary metropolis swallowed by the sea millennia ago due to a great curse of the Jinn. The scroll indicated that the scroll of forgotten history was protected within the city's ancient library, guarded by the Undying Mariner, a spirit cursed to guard the city's knowledge forever. The precise location was a deep, vast trench in the still, ominous waters of the Ocean of Whispers, far to the southeast. Sayf directed the ship of the brass mast toward the southeast. The magical vessel sliced through the water with impossible speed, covering thousands of miles without a single sail adjustment. The prince spent this time recovering his strength and studying the new challenges detailed in the sacred parchment. The section on the Ocean of Whispers was chilling. It spoke of absolute silence, terrifying, crushing pressure, and vast, blind creatures of the deep that fed on both sound and light. After another long month of swift, solitary travel, the ship of the brass mast reached the Ocean of Whispers. The water here was unusually dark and profoundly still, actively absorbing all noise. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with a primal, aquatic dread. Sayf commanded the ship to stop and consulted the scroll one final time. The scroll provided an intricate incantation to prepare the magical ship for the crushing descent. Sayf recited the complex, deep-sea charm. The entire ship sealed itself with a translucent, shimmering barrier of pure energy. The prince, taking a final deep breath of surface air, commanded the ship to descend. The descent was long, terrifying, and completely silent. The surface light vanished quickly, leaving the ship suspended in absolute crushing darkness. The outside pressure was immense, a weight capable of flattening mountains, but the shimmering barrier held perfectly, humming with faint power. The prince peered through the metal hull, which had become temporarily transparent, and saw monstrous shapes, creatures of the deep ocean, blind, colossal, and ancient, passing silently by in the black void. The descent continued for what felt like an age. The ship of the brass mast was guided only by the faint, internal light of the scroll and the pure force of the prince's will. Finally, the ship reached the floor of the trench. There, lying silent and still beneath layers of silt and millennia of crushing darkness, was the legendary city of the Sunken Bells. The city was vast, built of black marble and covered in heavy coral and barnacles. Its grand structures, towering temples, and ruined marketplaces lay silent in the eternal dark. The city's namesake came from the giant bronze bells that hung in the highest, broken towers. They were now cracked, silent, and covered in deep-sea growth, never to toll again. The very sight was a monument to lost power and silence. Following the scroll's guidance, Sayf landed the ship of the brass mast safely in the ancient marketplace, a colossal empty square. He recited another charm from the scroll, which created a localized, breathable sphere of air around him, a small, fragile bubble of life and sound in the overwhelming silence. He stepped out of the ship, into the cold, silent depths, beginning his perilous trek through the ruins toward the ancient library. Sayf knew he was nearing his goal, but the true guardian of the silent city awaited. Sayf stepped out of the ship of the brass mast, surrounded by his fragile bubble of breathable air. The silence of the city of the sunken bells was overwhelming, amplifying the slight sounds of his breathing and the faint humming of his protective sphere. The deep ocean cold penetrated his armor, yet his determination burned bright. He moved cautiously through the vast, ruined city. Structures of black marble lay shattered, overgrown with strange, bioluminescent flora of the deep. He followed the scroll's subtle internal light, navigating away from the grand towers and toward the immense structure of the ancient library. The library was partially collapsed, but its great stone walls still exuded a powerful aura of forgotten knowledge. Sayf entered the main hall. The interior was remarkably preserved, considering the millennia spent under the sea. Rows upon rows of stone shelves contained scrolls of heavy metal and clay, covered in indecipherable script. At the center of the largest hall, standing immobile upon a dais, was the guardian, the undying mariner. He was a colossal figure, clad in armor made of corroded bronze and barnacle-covered bone. His face was permanently etched with the despair of eternal service, and his eyes glowed with a cold, pale light. He held a giant, trident-like weapon, pointed directly at the prince. The undying mariner did not move, but his voice boomed in the air bubble around Sayf, a chilling sound that seemed to come from the crushing depths themselves. Who dares to trespass in the silent domain of the forgotten? I am Prince Sayf, son of Sultan Aziz Almas, the prince announced, his voice steady despite the terrifying presence. I seek the scroll of forgotten history, destined for Shahail. The mariner scoffed, raising his trident slowly. Many mortals have sought this knowledge, and all have become part of the silence. To take the scroll, you must defeat me. But I am not flesh. I am the curse of the depths. No weapon can harm the undying. Sayf knew this was a trial of wits, not strength. He consulted the scroll, which he held tightly. The text on the undying mariner was brief but clear. His weapon is despair. His shield is his endless existence. He cannot be defeated, but he can be set free. The scroll revealed that the mariner's curse, binding him to guard the city's knowledge forever, could only be broken by an act of profound, selfless release, performed in the presence of the scroll of forgotten history itself. The mariner's true desire was not to guard the library, but to finally rest. Sayf ignored the mariner's threatening stance. He moved past the giant, walking directly to the stone pedestal that the mariner was tasked to guard. Upon it lay a large, unrolled scroll made of flexible gold. This was the scroll of forgotten history. As Sayf touched the scroll, the entire library shook, and the undying mariner roared, swinging his trident down with blinding speed. The prince ducked the blow and quickly opened the golden scroll. He began reciting the complex, mournful words of release he had memorized from Kaider's sacred parchment. The words were not an incantation of power, but a deep, sorrowful prayer, thanking the mariner for his noble, eternal service and granting him the peace of the earth and the deep. As Sayf finished the prayer, the mariner's bronze armor glowed intensely white-hot. The giant figure slumped forward, his massive trident clattering silently on the stone floor. The cold, pale light left his eyes, replaced by an expression of profound, quiet peace. The undying mariner was finally free. His eternal burden had been lifted not by a sword, but by compassion and wisdom. Sayf retrieved the scroll of forgotten history and sealed it safely next to the stone of perpetual youth. The two impossible gifts were now his. He had passed the physical trial of fire and the spiritual trial of the deep. He returned quickly to the ship of the brass mast, his heart now filled with complete certainty. The time had come to face the king of the Jinn. Sayf sealed the scroll of forgotten history and returned swiftly to the ship of the brass mast. The protective sphere of air dissolved behind him, instantly giving way to the cold, crushing pressure of the deep ocean. He secured the two impossible gifts, the magical stone of perpetual youth and the golden scroll, side by side. They represented the culmination of his journey through fire and silence. As he stood before them, a profound sense of exhaustion mixed with absolute triumph washed over him. He had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. Sayf took the helm and commanded the ship of the brass mast to ascend. The magical vessel hummed, the translucent energy barrier intensified, and the ship began its long, silent journey upward, leaving the legendary city of the sunken bells behind in its eternal tomb of darkness. The ascent was faster than the descent. Soon, the immense black void gave way to a faint blue-green light, and then, with a final surge, the ship breached the surface of the ocean of whispers. The sun was blinding, and the air, though still, felt vibrant after the profound silence of the deep. Sayf had returned to the world of light. He spent the next few days in quiet contemplation. The ship of the brass mast sailed slowly in the calm surface waters as Sayf examined the treasures he carried. The stone of perpetual youth was cool and smooth, radiating a faint, revitalizing energy. It was a gift that promised endless life and vitality, a tempting offer for a Jinn king who already commanded immense power. The scroll of forgotten history, made of flexible gold, held the deep truths of the Jinn's creation, a knowledge that Shahil himself might not fully possess, granting Sayf unique intellectual leverage. Sayf realized the nature of the trials was not just about acquiring objects, but about his own transformation. The fire of the volcano tested his courage and physical endurance. The chilling silence of the deep tested his compassion and wisdom, proving that he was worthy of the ethereal Badi'a not through brute force, but through a noble heart capable of breaking a curse. He now felt an unshakable confidence. His love for Badi'a, which had started as a sickly dream, had been forged into a powerful, defining force. The physical illness that had plagued him in Cairo was entirely gone, replaced by the resilience of a true seeker. Consulting Kaider's sacred parchment, Sayf read the final, most crucial section, the instructions for navigating the final passage. The parchment detailed the exact gateway coordinates to the realm of the Jinn, a hidden dimension where Shahil ruled. The instructions emphasized that the journey through this final gateway would demand absolute purity of intent, as the gate itself tested the soul of the traveler. Sayf directed the ship of the brass mast toward the far, ethereal northeast. This was the final stretch of the world of men before the magical transition to the Jinn's dimension. The ship sailed with renewed purpose, driven by the prince's certainty. As the days turned into weeks, the very appearance of the world began to subtly change. The sky turned a shade of gold never seen before. The air became crystalline and strangely light. Sayf knew he was approaching the magical boundary. Finally, the ship reached a point in the vast ocean where the water seemed to end, replaced by a massive, shimmering curtain of pure white light that rose into the heavens. This was the gateway of the Jinn. Sayf knew he was crossing the point of no return. Beyond this gate lay the domain of the mighty Shahil, the king of the Jinn, the one who held Badi'a's fate and his own in his hands. He took a steadying breath, gripped the helm firmly, and steered the ship of the brass mast directly toward the brilliant, silent gateway. He was ready for the confrontation that would decide his destiny and the destiny of his impossible love. Sayf took a steadying breath, gripped the helm firmly, and steered the ship of the brass mast directly toward the massive, shimmering curtain of white light, the gateway of the Jinn. As the ship pierced the barrier, the world dissolved. It was not a violent transition, but a dizzying, complete reversal of reality. The ship was no longer sailing on water, but gliding through an atmosphere of pure, crystalline light. The sails, woven from moonlight, now flared with an intense, silver power. Sayf realized he had entered the hidden dimension, the realm where the elemental forces of the Jinn held sway. The skies above were not blue, but a shifting tapestry of deep emerald, violet, and gold. The sea beneath them was a field of swirling, iridescent mist, stretching infinitely in all directions. The air itself resonated with an ancient, high-pitched hum, the sound of pure magic and untold power. This was the final, most testing stretch of the 7 seas of the invisible. The environment was magnificent but profoundly alien. constantly challenging Sayf's mortal senses. Illusions materialized out of the mist, visions of his comfortable life in Cairo, promises of easier paths, and terrifying phantoms of legendary jinn designed to break his resolve. Sayf countered them all. He locked his focus entirely on the sacred parchment, which now glowed brightly, showing him the true path through the dimensional turbulence. Most powerfully, he focused on the memory of Badi'a, her sublime image shielding his heart from despair and distraction. His love had truly become his strongest defense. The journey through this magical dimension lasted several days. The ship flew forward at incredible speed, leaving behind the known laws of physics. Then, emerging from a field of shimmering ruby-red clouds, Sayf saw it, the goal of his impossible quest, the heart of the Jinn realm. In the distance, rising from the ethereal mists, was a vast, sprawling metropolis, constructed not on land, but seemingly suspended between the sky and the mist. This was the legendary capital city of Shahil, the king of the Jinn. The scale of the city was beyond mortal comprehension. Its towers were impossibly tall, built from materials that glittered and pulsed with inner light, likely polished obsidian, amethyst, and metals unknown to man. The architecture defied gravity, featuring arches that floated freely and terraces that spiraled into the colored sky. It was a terrifying masterpiece of pure magic and colossal scale. At the very center of the city, dominating the entire vista, stood Shahil's royal residence, a single, immense citadel known as the Palace of the Thousand Pillars. Its height was dizzying, and its peak vanished into the topmost layer of the emerald sky. Sayf felt a surge of awe and intimidation, but no fear. He had brought the impossible gifts, and he had proven his spirit was worthy. He directed the ship of the brass mast toward the nearest safe docking point. The scroll guided him to a huge, circular landing basin situated on the city's outer edge, reserved for visiting magical vessels. The basin was empty save for his own ship. Sayf brought the ship of the brass mast to a smooth, silent stop. The moonlight sails instantly furled, and the brass mast ceased its humming. The prince looked out upon the silent, glittering city, knowing that the time for travel was over. The time for petition and trial had begun. He secured the two gifts, the magical stone of perpetual youth and the scroll of forgotten history, in a reinforced pouch, which he wore across his chest beneath his polished armor. He ran a final hand over his ruby ring, the symbol of his mortal identity and the constant reminder of his promise to his father. He stepped off the ship of the brass mast and onto the landing platform. The platform was made of a smooth, dark purple stone that felt strangely warm beneath his boots. He was in the heart of the Jinn world, standing alone, a mortal prince demanding the hand of the daughter of the king of the Jinn. As soon as his boots touched the ground, a single figure detached itself from the shadows of a nearby archway, a royal emissary, tall and thin, draped in silvery, shimmering robes, awaiting his arrival. The final confrontation was at hand. As Sayf stepped onto the purple stone platform, the single figure awaiting him detached itself from the shadows. He was a Jinn, tall and lean, draped in silvery, shimmering robes that moved without air. His features were sharp, his eyes a cold, polished emerald. This was the royal emissary. The Jinn bowed formally, a deep, precise gesture. His voice was smooth and resonant, echoing slightly in the crystalline air. Prince Sayf, the emissary stated without asking for his identity. King Shahil, master of the Jinn realms, awaits your presence. Follow me." Sayf nodded once, confirming his readiness. He knew that in this realm, every moment was a test of his poise and courage. He followed the emissary across the vast platform and into the depths of the shimmering city. The city of the thousand pillars was even more magnificent up close. The streets were paved with gems that pulsed with light, and the towering buildings were alive with intricate, shifting patterns of magic. The city was populated by jinn of every shape and element, those made of clear air, those crafted from smooth black obsidian, and those glowing faintly with internal fire. They moved with a silent, purposeful grace, casting only fleeting, curious glances at the lone mortal in polished armor. The emissary led Sayf through towering arches and down long, spiraling causeways that seemed to float in the air. The destination was the colossal central citadel, the Palace of the Thousand Pillars. The palace entrance itself was an overwhelming spectacle, a massive archway carved from a single piece of dark sapphire, guarded by two colossal, silent figures of solid smoke jinn, their forms constantly swirling. Inside, the scale was dizzying. They traversed hallways whose ceilings were so high they were lost in a haze of colored light, supported by pillars that truly numbered in the thousands, carved from every jewel and rare metal imaginable. The atmosphere was one of silent, immutable power, a kingdom that would endure long after the world of men had turned to dust. The emissary finally stopped before the doors to the throne room. These doors were not made of wood or metal, but of flowing, solidified golden light, etched with the history and lineage of Shahail's ancient dynasty. The emissary turned to Sayf. "Prince of Egypt," he instructed, "King Shahail grants you audience. You may take 3 steps inside, then you must kneel and await his command to speak. Show proper respect to the king of the jinn, for any lapse may be the end of your quest." The emissary waved his hand, and the golden light of the doors parted silently. Sayf stepped across the threshold, feeling the immense gravity of the power within the room immediately weigh upon his chest. The throne room was immense, large enough to hold an entire mortal city. The ceiling was a dome of pure, starry night sky, moving and twinkling with real cosmic light. At the far end of the room, upon a dais carved from a single, flawless black diamond, sat Shahail, the king of the jinn. Shahail was colossal, much taller than any mortal man, yet his appearance was one of perfected, terrifying beauty. His skin was the shade of polished bronze, and his robes were woven from threads of pure silver fire. His crown was a single, immense emerald, catching the cosmic light of the dome. His presence radiated a silent, crushing authority, the power of a being who had witnessed the formation of mountains and the evaporation of oceans. Sayf performed the instruction flawlessly. He took 3 deliberate steps onto the diamond floor, then knelt, resting the hilt of his sword against the cold stone, his head bowed. He felt the weight of the Jinn King's scrutiny upon him. A deep, resonating voice, which seemed to vibrate the air in his very bones, finally broke the silence. The voice belonged to Shahail. "Mortal Prince Sayf," the king pronounced, his voice carrying the calm authority of thunder. "You have crossed the bounds of the visible world, navigated our forbidden seas, and entered my domain. Such audacity is either madness or monumental devotion. State your purpose and speak quickly, for my time is not measured in the brief decades of your kind." Sayf raised his head, looking directly into the stern, ancient eyes of the king of the jinn. The confrontation that would decide his destiny had officially begun. Sayf remained kneeling before Shahayal, the king of the Jinn. He gathered his courage, focusing not on the king's colossal size or immense power, but on the memory of the light in Badi'a eyes from his dream. Mighty King Shahayal, Sayf began, his voice surprisingly clear and strong, resonating slightly in the vast hall. I am Sayf, Prince of Egypt. I stand here not as an emissary of my kingdom, but as a seeker of destiny. I have traveled beyond the world of men into the forbidden realms to beg for a singular, impossible favor. Sayf narrated his quest swiftly and directly. The dream that had afflicted him, the diagnosis of his impossible love for Badi'a, the daughter of the king, and the divine guidance he received from Kaider. He finished by stating his ultimate request. I have done as the ancient prophecies demanded, Sayf stated. I have proven my endurance in the heart of fire and my compassion in the depths of silence. I am here to request, with all humility and devotion, the hand of your daughter, Badi'a, in marriage. A deep, low sound, almost like the grating of mountains, emanated from Shahayal. It was neither a laugh nor a curse, but a sound of ancient disbelief. You speak of prophecy, mortal, Shahayal boomed. Prophecy states that any mortal seeking my daughter must present gifts that hold true power, power that moves the very essence of the Jinn. You speak bold words, but your hands are empty. What can a prince of dust and brief time offer to the king of eternity? Sayf rose slowly, never breaking eye contact with the king. He reached into the reinforced pouch beneath his armor and drew out the first gift. My hands are not empty, great king, Sayf asserted. He knelt again and placed the magical stone of perpetual youth upon the diamond floor. The stone, which had a cool, faint inner light, immediately reacted to the sheer magical energy of the throne room. It pulsed brightly, casting a soft, white glow that visibly diminished the searing silver fire of Shahayal's aura. The stone represented absolute, unfailing vitality, a precious commodity even among the long-lived Jinn. Shahayal leaned forward on his throne, his immense eyes narrowing as he gazed at the stone. For the first time, a flicker of something beyond sternness, perhaps surprise or respect, crossed his bronze face. The stone of perpetual youth, Shahayal whispered, the name echoing like a lost memory. This gift is indeed rare. It would grant my realm vitality beyond measure. This is a potent offering, mortal. But it is only one. Sayf immediately produced the second gift, the heavy, flexible scroll of forgotten history, made of pure gold, retrieved from the deeps of the ocean of whispers. Sayf placed the scroll next to the stone. The scroll did not glow with light, but radiated an aura of profound, still knowledge. And this, Sayf explained, is the scroll of forgotten history. It contains the complete true history of the formation of the Jinn realms, knowledge lost to time, and perhaps unknown even to the greatest scholars of your court. Knowledge, mighty king, is the ultimate power. Shahayal stared at the scroll. The power it contained was undeniable. For a race that measured its life in millennia, the ultimate history of their own existence was an unparalleled treasure. The king then looked back at Sayf, his gaze piercing the mortal to his soul. You have done the impossible, Sayf of Egypt, Shahayal finally declared, his voice losing some of its thunderous quality and becoming dangerously contemplative. You have performed deeds that would kill the greatest of Jinn. You have brought me gifts worthy of the greatest kings. He raised his hand, and with a silent command, The two gifts rose from the floor and floated to rest upon the arms of his diamond throne. Your bravery and your devotion are proven, Shahil conceded. But a king of the Jinn cannot simply give his daughter to a mortal, even one such as you. There is one final, greater barrier to cross. The trials you have faced were merely the tests of entry. Now begins the test of worthiness itself. Shahil paused, letting the silence build in the cosmic hall. My daughter, Badi'a, must be consulted. You have convinced me, Sayf, but you must now convince her. And if she agrees to see you, I will set a final condition, a condition so difficult that it will test not your strength, but the very purity of your heart and the resilience of your love. With a sudden sweeping gesture of his hand, Shahil commanded, Summon Badi'a. Let the prince see the subject of his obsession. As Shahil spoke the command, a new door, formed not of sapphire or light but of shimmering white pearl, materialized on the far side of the throne room. It opened silently, and Badi'a entered. Sayf's breath caught in his throat. Even kneeling, he had to steady himself against the sheer reality of her beauty. She was exactly as he had seen her in the dream, but infinitely more real and luminous. Her hair was like woven moonlight, cascading over robes of shimmering silk the color of dawn. Her eyes, which he had seen only as distant stars, were now clear pools of deep, melancholy light. She was the most exquisite being he had ever imagined, radiating a perfect, ethereal beauty that transcended the world of men and jinn alike. She moved with immense grace, her presence instantly softening the harsh, magical aura of the throne room. She walked slowly toward the dais, yet her eyes were not on her father, but scanning the hall until they found the kneeling mortal prince. When her eyes met Sayf's, a visible jolt passed between them, a connection instantaneous and undeniable. Sayf felt his heart surge with an overwhelming love and relief. This was the end of his suffering. The phantom of his dreams was real, and she was before him. Badia''s beautiful features were etched with profound sorrow. She recognized him instantly, recognizing the man who had abandoned his throne for a vision. Her melancholy glance conveyed not rejection, but deep, tragic understanding of the impossible chasm that separated them. She knelt before Shahil's throne, maintaining her silent gaze upon Sayf. Daughter, Shahil addressed her, his voice softening slightly, though retaining its massive authority. This mortal, Prince Sayf, claims to love you. He has done the impossible and presented gifts worthy of a Jinn king. He demands your hand. Look upon him. Have you any desire to entertain his madness? Badi'a finally turned her gaze to her father. My lord and king, she replied, her voice soft, like the chime of distant bells, yet carrying clearly through the immense hall. The dreams that brought him here have troubled me for many months. I have seen his journey through the stone of perpetual youth. His love is pure, his endurance monumental. I cannot condemn his madness, for it is shared by fate. This declaration sent a ripple of astonishment through the silent hall. Shahil smiled, a stern, powerful gesture that showed he was pleased by her honesty, yet utterly unmoved in his intent to protect her. Then the negotiation continues, Shahil declared, his gaze fixing upon Sayf with renewed severity. You have my permission to look upon my daughter, Sayf, but that is all. I will set a final condition. If you meet this condition, you shall have her. If you fail, you shall return to your world and never speak her name again, or you will perish. Shahil leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, making the challenge even more menacing. Your gifts, Sayf, are for me. Your test is for your soul. You have proven yourself brave and wise. But a mortal cannot rule beside a daughter of the Jinn without mastering her element. The final condition is this, Shahil announced, his voice swelling to fill the hall. You shall remain in my palace for 1 full lunar year, 12 full cycles of the moon. During this time, you must not seek Badi'a out. You must not speak a single word to her, nor must you touch her. You must live in my realm, breathing the essence of the Jinn, without contact with the object of your love. Shahil paused, letting the crushing weight of the condition sink in. If you break this vow, if you seek her out, utter 1 word, or touch her, before the final hour of the 12th month, your life force will dissolve instantly into the air of my palace, and my daughter will be sealed away from mortals forever. Can you conquer the ultimate agony of unfulfilled devotion, Sayf? Can you love her from silence? The trial was not one of strength, but of impossible endurance of the heart. Sayf, looking into the sorrowful, pleading eyes of Badi'a, knew that breaking the silence would be the hardest battle of his entire life. He bowed low. I accept your condition, mighty king, Sayf affirmed, his voice resolute. I will conquer the silence for Badi'a. Upon Sayf's acceptance of the condition, Shahil merely waved a dismissive hand. You are granted lodging, mortal. Live and breathe the air of my realm. The countdown begins now. Let us see if your devotion is truly stronger than your nature. The Jinn emissary led Sayf away from the throne room and deep into the sprawling palace. Sayf was given quarters that were luxurious yet sterile, a room carved from pale, polished amethyst, overlooking the spiraling spires of the city. He was provided with sustenance, fruits that tasted of pure light and water that tasted of cool mountain air, all magically prepared to suit his mortal needs. The year of silence began, and it was a torment far greater than the volcano or the crushing deep. Sayf lived in isolation, acutely aware of the countless Jinn who glided through the hallways. His days were consumed by study, using the remaining sections of Kaider's scroll to understand the Jinn's laws and customs. He walked the silent, glittering gardens of the palace, always vigilant, always counting the hours. The real agony, however, was the constant, deliberate temptation devised by fate, or perhaps by Shahil himself. Badi'a did not remain hidden. She was a daughter of the king and a princess of the realm. She moved through the palace as she willed. In the vast, silent gardens, Sayf would find her seated beneath trees whose leaves were woven gold, gazing with profound melancholy out over the mists. In the great cosmic hall of the palace library, she would sit opposite him, reading ancient Jinn texts. They were always near, always silent. Every time Badi'a appeared, Sayf felt an unbearable pressure in his chest, a desperate primal urge to speak her name, to simply confirm the reality of her presence with a single word. He felt the fire of his love threaten to break the promise he had made. The scroll had warned that the penalty for breaking the vow was instant dissolution of his life force into the palace air. He endured a daily, agonizing confrontation with his own devotion. Badia''s silence was as powerful as his own. She never once addressed him, yet her eyes conveyed volumes. Sometimes they held sorrow, mourning the barrier between them. At other times, they held warning, urging him silently to be strong. Once she passed him in a hallway, her silken sleeve brushing lightly against his armored wrist, a touch that felt like lightning, and Sayf had to stop and lean against a pillar, trembling, fighting the urge to turn and seize her hand. Month after month, Sayf maintained his vigil. The Jinn air that he breathed, meant to grant him endurance, instead sharpened the pain of his longing. He grew gaunt from the sheer mental effort of suppressing his heart's desire. The ruby ring on his finger became a source of cold comfort, constantly reminding him of his duty to his father and his promise to Badi'a. The Jinn court watched his suffering with detached curiosity. They saw the mortal prince, handsome and brave, wasting away from the torment of enforced silence. Many believed he would break before the 6th month, his human weakness succumbing to the power of his devotion. As the 9th month began, Sayf was walking through a remote, shimmering courtyard late one night. Badi'a was there, seated by a fountain of liquid light. She did not look away as he approached. Instead, she reached out a delicate hand and pointed toward the fountain's basin. Sayf paused. He walked over and looked into the light-filled water. Badi'a had traced words in the water's smooth surface with her finger. The words were written in the flowing script of the Jinn. Be strong. Our enemies watch. Sayf instantly understood. The silence was not just a test of his love, but a shield against those in the palace who wished him to fail, perhaps rivals in the Jinn court, or those who simply despised the idea of a mortal marrying the king's daughter. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to Badi'a, acknowledging the warning. He knew now the true stakes of the silence, his life and her freedom. He retreated quickly, the words traced in water, having renewed his resolve for the final, brutal stretch of the year. The whispered warning from Badi'a renewed Sayf's vigilance. He realized the silence was not merely a trial of devotion, but a life-or-death strategic barrier. He was not just fighting his own heart. He was fighting the silent hostility of the Jinn court. The most dangerous member of that court was Prince Marzaban, Shahile's nephew. Marzaban was a formidable Jinn of immense power, consumed by jealousy. He saw Badi'a as his rightful bride and viewed Sayf as an embarrassing speck of dust threatening his ascent to the throne. Marzaban began moving openly against the mortal prince. Sayf endured the 10th and 11th months, his strength now drawn solely from his iron will. He had mastered the art of conveying respect and silence simultaneously. Finally, the dawn of the 12th and final month arrived. The tension in the palace of the 1,000 pillars was palpable. Shahile himself seemed to watch Sayf's every move, ready for the mortal to fail at the last moment. Marzaban knew Sayf would not break the silence in a casual encounter. He planned a definitive, crushing test for the final day, just hours before the year was officially complete, a moment when Sayf's emotional reserves would be entirely spent. The night before the final hour, Sayf was unable to sleep. He paced his amethyst chamber, the silence screaming in his ears. He focused on the image of Badi'a, counting down the last few minutes. At the pre-dawn hour, just as the final cycle was about to complete, Prince Marzaban acted. Sayf was taking his customary, solitary walk through a remote, echoing gallery of the palace. Suddenly, a contingent of Shahile's elite Jinn guards materialized, led by Marzaban himself, his emerald eyes blazing with malicious triumph. The guards did not attack Sayf. Instead, they quickly and efficiently materialized a colossal, shimmering cage of pure, cold force energy around him. Sayf's sword was useless against the magical barrier. Marzaban stepped close to the cage, his face contorted in a sneer. "Congratulations, mortal," he hissed, his voice heavy with magic designed to provoke despair. "You have almost completed your childish vow. But you will not complete it alive." Sayf remained silent, his gaze steady, refusing to acknowledge the taunts. Marzaban's trick was then revealed. A second group of guards brought in a figure cloaked entirely in rough black sackcloth. They threw the figure violently to the diamond floor, where the figure began to moan and gasp in pain, struggling against invisible bindings. Marzaban laughed, harsh, grating sound. "You have mastered silence for your beloved prince. But what if your beloved is in pain? Look closely, mortal. I have captured Badi'a herself. She is weak, and she suffers from a curse I laid upon her." The figure under the sackcloth let out a terrible, gasping cry, a sound of unbearable suffering. Marzaban leaned in, his voice soft, deadly. "One word, Sayf. Only one word of distress, one curse, one question to me, and you break the vow. Then you die, and I will claim Badi'a free from your mortal contamination. Save her, Sayf. Say her name. Speak to me." The figure writhed again, and this time a small pale hand slipped free of the sackcloth, the unmistakable, delicate hand of Badi'a. The sight of his beloved in pain, and the overwhelming temptation to speak a single word to ask if she was truly harmed, was the ultimate test. It was more agonizing than the fire, the deep, or the 11 months of silence combined. Sayf felt his heart tear. His lips involuntarily parted, the name Badi'a rising in his throat. But then Sayf saw something vital. He saw the struggling hand make a minuscule, almost invisible gesture. It was Badia''s secret signal from the fountain. "Be strong. Our enemies watch." It was a trick. Badi'a was not truly harmed, or the curse was not mortal. The entire spectacle was designed solely to force him to speak. With an enormous exertion of will, Sayf clamped his jaw shut. His face was white with pain, sweat pouring down his temples, but he remained silent, meeting Marzaban's hateful gaze with pure, unwavering resolve. He endured the sounds of suffering, trusting his love and Badia''s secret warning above his own instinct to help. Marzaban watched the clock. The prince did not speak. The final hour was closing. Marzaban screamed in frustrated rage, realizing his trick had failed. Just as the final second elapsed, and a year of silence was fulfilled, Shahail's majestic voice boomed from the walls, shattering the force cage and dispersing Marzaban and his guards like smoke. "Enough, Marzaban. You are defeated. The vow is complete. Sayf has won." The colossal voice of Shahail, shattering Marzaban's trick, echoed the single, powerful declaration, asterisk, "The vow is complete. Sayf has won, asterisk." Prince Marzaban, pale with fury, vanished instantly, dispersed by the king's authority. The figure in the sackcloth remained, now silent and still. Sayf rushed forward to the cloaked figure, his heart pounding. The year of silence was over. He could finally speak. He gently pulled away the rough sackcloth. It was not Badi'a, but a cleverly disguised Jinn servant, bound by Marzaban's magic to simulate the princess's features and distress. Sayf felt a wave of crushing relief, followed by a surge of white-hot anger at Marzaban's cruelty. A voice, sweet and clear, reached him. "Sayf." He turned. Badi'a stood there, having materialized instantly from the palace walls. She was safe, radiant, and her eyes, though still holding traces of sorrow, were filled with admiration and relief. "Badi'a," Sayf whispered, the sound of his own name and hers on his lips feeling strange and wondrous after a year of forced quiet. He knelt before her, not in supplication, but in pure devotion. "You are safe. Because of your strength, my prince," she affirmed, her voice a comforting balm to his soul. "I knew you would trust the warning." Before the two lovers could share another word, the Jinn emissary appeared and led them back to the throne room. Shahail remained upon the diamond dais, looking down upon them with an expression of complex, ancient pride. Sayf knelt once more, the weight of the moment pressing upon him. "Sayf of Egypt," Shahail pronounced, "you have proven your love stronger than fire, deeper than the sea, and more resilient than despair. You have met every single condition and endured the final, most brutal test. I, Shahail, king of the Jinn, formally accept your petition. You shall have my daughter, A ripple of awe and surprise swept through the unseen Jinn court. Sayf felt a wave of triumph so profound it almost overwhelmed him. He raised his head, ready to thank the king and claim his queen. But Shahil raised a hand, stopping him. However, the king continued, his voice taking on a new, serious tone. A complication unforeseen by my ancient laws has arisen. You have met my conditions, but there is one decree that must be addressed. Shahil revealed that centuries ago a binding magical decree was issued. The Princess Badi'a could only be wed on the day of the 7 stars, an astral convergence that happened only once every 500 years, and that day was tomorrow. Furthermore, any princess married on that day must be wed within the palace of the Grand Vizier of the Jinn. The palace of the Grand Vizier, Shahil explained, is currently occupied by my treacherous nephew, Prince Marzaban, who has been appointed temporary regent of the Western Realm. Marzaban, using an ancient legal loophole, has already issued a public magical decree claiming that if Badi'a does not arrive at his palace gates before the midnight hour of the day of the 7 stars, she is considered unclaimed, and he will claim her for himself by force of Jinn law. Shahil sighed, a sound like dry wind across a vast desert. I cannot, by sacred decree, interfere with a wedding arranged for the day of the 7 stars at the Vizier's palace. You have won the right to her hand, Sayf, but I cannot deliver her. You must take her. You must leave my court immediately, escape Marzaban's surveillance, and take Badi'a to the Vizier's palace before midnight tomorrow. Only then will your marriage be legally binding in the eyes of the Jinn. The king pointed toward the open doorway. Marzaban's rage is absolute. He will use every power at his command to stop you and claim Badi'a. I grant you 2 hours to prepare your flight. The ship of the brass mast awaits you. Go, mortals. Win your queen and defy the hatred of Marzaban. Sayf looked at Badi'a. The tests of love were not over. They had only just begun. The great, impossible wedding required an even greater, more impossible escape. The gravity of Shahil's final condition, an impossible escape under a ticking clock, settled heavily upon Sayf. The time for courtship and vows was over. The time for action was now. Sayf looked at Badi'a. The king has given us 2 hours, he stated, his voice sharp with urgency. Marzaban will not wait. We must leave immediately for the ship of the brass mast. Badi'a nodded, her gaze intense. My father Shahil has ensured Marzaban cannot interfere with the day of the 7 stars wedding, but he can certainly prevent us from reaching the Vizier's palace. Marzaban has placed a siege of powerful, silent Jinn around the ship of the brass mast. We cannot simply walk out. Then we shall fly, Sayf countered. I have the scroll. Does your power aid us now, Badi'a? It does, she confirmed. My abilities are not of fire or shadow, but of essence and illusion. I can manipulate the very texture of the air in this palace. We will not take the main routes. We will use the forgotten passageways. Badi'a led Sayf away from the throne room and into a hidden chamber behind a seemingly solid wall of amethyst. This chamber opened onto a narrow, spiral staircase made of dark, rough-hewn stone, a servant's passage, immune to the grand surveillance of the Jinn court. As they descended, Badi'a explained their strategy. The Vizier's palace is across the sea of shifting sands, a treacherous journey even for our strongest vessels. But the ship of the brass mast is faster than anything Marzaban can command. We must get aboard, breach the siege, and fly. They moved with breathless speed through the palace's hidden veins. Sayf, still clad in his armor, carried the 2 priceless gifts and the scroll. Badi'a, her movements fluid and silent, constantly emitted subtle waves of Jinn energy, creating brief, confusing illusions in their wake to misdirect any nearby sentries. They reached the exterior platform where the ship of the brass mast was anchored. The area was indeed surrounded. Sayf could see dozens of silent, dark figures, Marzaban's elite guards, forming an impregnable wall of magical power around the ship. Now Sayf, Badi'a instructed, her eyes glowing with focused energy. You must use the scroll to activate the ship's engines. I will create the diversion. Sayf sprinted toward the vessel, reciting the ship's activation charm from Kaider's scroll. The brass mast instantly began to hum, and the moonlight sails unfurled, snapping taut with inner magical energy. At that moment, Badi'a unleashed her power. She raised her hands, and the clear air above the guards shimmered and distorted. She created a colossal, perfect illusion of Shahail, a towering phantom of the king, looking down in terrible judgment upon his own guards. The Jinn guards immediately froze, paralyzed by fear and confusion, unsure if their king had come to punish them for their nephew's treachery. Sayf used the split second of chaos. He leaped aboard the ship of the brass mast and seized the helm. The siege line was momentarily broken, but Prince Marzaban had been monitoring the escape. He materialized directly in the path of the ship, a hurricane of green and black energy erupting around him. He was no longer a politician, but a furious elemental force. You will not have her, mortal. Marzaban screamed, his voice shaking the palace spires. He drew a sword of pure shadow and lunged at the ship. Hold fast, Badi'a cried, leaping onto the deck beside Sayf. The ship's barrier is strongest when moving. Go. Sayf pushed the throttle of the magical helm to its limit. The ship of the brass mast shot forward, an irresistible arrow of metal and moonlight. Marzaban's shadow sword struck the translucent energy shield surrounding the vessel. The impact was deafening, rocking the ship violently, but the barrier held, repelling the furious Jinn. Marzaban was thrown back, his armor cracking from the force. He recovered instantly, shouting commands to his remaining forces, urging them to pursue. The ship of the brass mast soared away from the king's palace, punching through the atmosphere of the Jinn realm. Sayf looked back. Behind them, the air was quickly filling with dozens of Jinn chasers, all flying on black wings of elemental smoke, led by the enraged Marzaban. The time for sailing the slow seas was over. They were now in a desperate high-speed chase through an alien sky, racing against the Jinn, against the clock, and against the immense distance to the vizier's palace before the midnight hour. The magical craft, the ship of the brass mast, surged like an arrow through the Jinn realm sky, leaving Shahail's glittering palace far behind. The speed was immense, but Prince Marzaban and his forces were relentless. There were dozens of elite Jinn, flying on wings of black smoke, launching shadow fire and green energy spheres that slammed against the ship's transparent shield. Sayf gripped the helm tightly, steering the ship in frantic, evasive patterns to dodge the attacks. His experience as a mortal sailor was invaluable here, even if this was a sky and not an ocean. "They are too close, Sayf," cried Badi'a, radiating a faint light. "Their flight capability is unmatched. I must distract them." Badi'a raised her hands and unleashed her power, weaving illusions into the pursuer's path. Towering crystalline mountains and vast whirlpools of moonlight suddenly appeared, causing Marzaban's soldiers to instinctively swerve, slightly slowing their formation. Meanwhile, Badi'a pinpointed their target. "We are approaching the sea of shifting sands, Sayf. It is the western border of the realm. We must descend rapidly." Sayf guided the ship into a sharp dive toward the horizon. The crystalline sky quickly turned to a dusty, reddish hue. As they breached the lower atmosphere, Sayf saw the landscape. The sea of shifting sands was a colossal, churning desert of magical, flowing sand that constantly changed shape, shimmering yellow and orange. Sayf commanded the ship to fly low, its brass hull nearly skimming the flowing dunes. Marzaban realized that aerial illusions were useless here. Emerged from the sands, Marzaban roared. His soldiers complied. The flying jinn vanished, replaced by massive earthbound sand jinn who emerged from the dunes themselves. They were colossal, malformed giants of sand and clay, moving with surprising speed, aiming to bring down the ship. These creatures, known as hulks of malice, were drawn to Badi'a's magical energy. "They've changed tactics," said Badi'a, strange showing on her features. "They are attacking the ship from below. I cannot maintain the shield and the illusion simultaneously." Sayf remembered that the hulks of malice were slow-moving at their core. He reverted to a non-magical, mortal tactic. He seized a pouch containing some rough stones he had kept from the mountain of fire and grabbed a handful of the volatile, flowing sand that whipped over the deck. In a desperate move, Sayf threw the sand and stones forcefully toward the leading formation of the hulks. The magical sand, charged with Marzaban's energy, reacted violently when it struck the hulk's clay bodies. Simultaneously, Badi'a threw her full power into a final trick. She created a colossal sensory illusion, transforming the ship for a split second into a striking column of lightning that appeared to hit the very heart of the sand sea. The result was a non-magical, explosive reaction. A massive magical sandstorm formed, a swirling pillar of glittering dust that completely obscured Marzaban's vision and shattered the hulks of malice formation. The ship cut through the massive storm. When they emerged on the far side, the chase had dispersed. They had bought precious time. On the horizon, the end was in sight. The vizier's palace rose from a stony desert, a majestic, dark marble structure. The sun was just beginning to set on the Jinn realm. "We are almost there," Badi'a gasped. "Sayf, we only have a few hours left before midnight." Sayf steered the ship of the brass mast, which now carried the weight of their impossible hopes, at full speed toward the vizier's palace. They had reached the final station. The ship of the brass mast tore across the stony desert toward the vizier's palace. The palace, built of dark, polished marble, stood as a solitary monument under the strange, fading light of the Jinn sky. The sun of the Jinn realm was sinking rapidly, and the day of the 7 stars was quickly approaching the midnight deadline. Sayf and Badi'a landed the magical ship near the massive, closed gates of the palace. They disembarked quickly, the 2 impossible gifts secured. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The air itself seemed to wait for the midnight hour. Suddenly, Prince Marzaban materialized directly in front of the gates, accompanied by the remaining few of his most powerful guards. He was disheveled, covered in the dust of the magical sandstorm, and his fury was a visible, corrosive aura of black energy. "Too late, mortal," Marzaban roared, blocking their path. "You have bought time, but you cannot buy the remaining minutes. I will crush you here, take Badi'a, and complete the decree myself." Sayf immediately drew his royal sword. "You have lost, Marzaban. Shahail himself decreed my victory. The king's decree is nothing compared to the law of the Jinn's realm." Marzaban scoffed. "If Badi'a does not pass through these gates before the final bell, she is mine, and you will die by my shadow blade." Marzaban lunged, his shadow sword aimed for Sayf's heart. Sayf, though mortal, met the attack with the skill of a trained warrior, deflecting the blade with a shower of sparks. But Marzaban's power was overwhelming. The Jinn Prince pressed the attack, driving Sayf backward. Seeing Sayf struggling against the superior Jinn strength, Badi'a acted. She knew she could not fight Marzaban directly, but she could use the atmosphere of the vizier's palace, which was bound by laws of ceremony and time. Badi'a raised her voice and began to chant a swift, sharp incantation. It was the hymn of the final hour, a powerful ancient Jinn chant of sacred timing and completion. As Badi'a chanted, the ground around the gates began to glow, and the atmosphere intensified. The enormous bronze bell in the vizier's highest tower, silent for centuries, began to chime. Marzaban, distracted by the chimes and the sudden surge of ceremonial power, wavered. "Stop that noise, Badi'a. Stop it!" he screamed, his focus fractured. Sayf seized the moment. With a mighty effort, he reversed the pressure, driving Marzaban back. He did not seek to wound the Jinn, but to create an opening. "Now, Badi'a, go!" Sayf yelled. Badi'a ran past the struggling figures, carrying the stone of perpetual youth and the scroll of forgotten history. She reached the gates and with a final desperate burst of energy, placed the two gifts upon the steps. The gifts pulsed, reacting to the sanctity of the wedding site. The great bronze bell in the tower chimed for the 12th and final time. It was the stroke of midnight. At the exact moment the final chime faded, Badi'a stepped across the threshold. The gates of the vizier's palace slammed shut behind her, sealing her within. Marzaban stared in stunned silence. Sayf, exhausted, watched as the palace of the vizier suddenly radiated a blinding golden light, the sign of a marriage completed under the law of the 7 stars. "The law has been invoked, Marzaban," a voice boomed from the walls. It was Shahail's essence speaking through the palace. "The marriage is complete. The contract is binding. Prince Sayf has won my daughter and defeated your treachery." Marzaban let out a terrible, defeated shriek. He collapsed, his black power dissolving into harmless smoke. The game was over. Sayf remained by the closed gates until the first light of the new Jinn dawn. The gates opened and Badi'a emerged, no longer the sorrowful princess, but a radiant, powerful queen, dressed in the luminous silks of the sacred Jinn marriage. She took his hand. "Come, my prince. Let us return to your realm." Sayf and Badi'a sailed the ship of the brass mast back through the gateway of the Jinn, across the familiar seas, and finally back to the world of men. They arrived in Cairo, not as a lovesick prince in a ghostly dream, but as a king and queen, bringing the profound wisdom of the Jinn realm with them. Sultan Aziz Al-Masr wept tears of joy, seeing his son cured and crowned with an immortal love. Sayf and Badi'a were married again in a grand ceremony in Cairo, and they ruled Egypt with wisdom, compassion, and power drawn from both the mortal and the Jinn worlds. Prince Sayf al-Muluk and Badi'a al-Jamal lived happily ever after, their story a legendary testament to the power of a devotion so absolute that it conquered fire, silence, time, and the very boundaries between the worlds. And so, dear listeners, the journey of Prince Sayf and Badi'a, the daughter of the Jinn King, finally concludes. Love triumphed over fire, over the silence of the deep, and over the malice of Prince Marzaban. Sayf and Badi'a returned to the land of Egypt to rule together, carrying with them the power of both worlds, the wisdom of men and the magic of the Jinn. Sayf proved that nothing is impossible for a true heart, and that faith and love is stronger than any barrier or wall. But wait, did you truly think our adventures ended here? In the endless expanse of the Arabian Nights, the sands of time conceal countless untold legends, grander heroes and deeper magic than we have yet witnessed. Therefore, be ready. Tomorrow night, we will embark on a completely new voyage, meeting a new protagonist facing a new destiny. Be prepared for a tale filled with unexpected wealth, powerful creatures, and trials that test the human spirit in entirely new ways. Do not miss the appointment. Sleep well, and until we meet again for a new legend and secrets that never end,